Have you ever walked away from a conversation and asked yourself, why did I let them speak to me like that? Rude people don't always yell or swear. Sometimes they smile, speak gently, yet every word cuts like a blade wrapped in velvet. They interrupt, mock, and strangely. They expect your silence. You force a smile, trying to keep the peace, while your self-respect quietly bleeds. But Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to bow our heads. It teaches us to hold our composure and respond with clarity, not anger. In a world where reacting is mistaken for strength, sometimes the calmest silence is the sharpest counterblow. This video won't give you tricks to win over anyone. Instead, it offers you a few quiet, simple phrases, ones that help you draw the line, protect your dignity, and leave the rude ones speechless. No need to stoop down, no need to explode. Just one sentence, said at the right time. 1. I'm not the one you should test. Some people don't enter conversations to understand or connect. They show up to see if you're easy to break. They toss out a vague jab, a joke that crosses the line, or a comment clearly meant to offend, not to find truth, but to probe your limits. They don't want resolution. They just want to see if you're weak enough to swallow disrespect with a smile. These people aren't strong. They're just used to getting away with it. I used to stay quiet, back down, trade my self-respect for the illusion of peace. In meetings, I took the mockery and smiled it off. At gatherings, I let the insults slide and told myself, it's not worth the drama. I'm more mature. I'm in control. But the truth is, sometimes my silence wasn't strength. It was fear. Fear of being judged, of making things worse, of being disliked. And that fear slowly chipped away at me, bit by bit. Until one day, I realized something simple. Politeness doesn't mean letting people trample your boundaries. Staying calm doesn't mean allowing disrespect. There's a vast difference between composure and passivity, between quiet and surrender. And I decided I no longer wanted to be the one constantly tested. I no longer wanted to be the one who stayed silent while my dignity took the hit. I remember the moment everything changed. In a meeting at my former company, I was presenting a project I had spent weeks preparing. Every detail, from the data to the strategy, had been carefully thought through. But just as I finished the first part, a colleague known for his arrogance, the type who mocks others to feel important, cut in with a smirk. Sounds like textbook fluff. Do you even know what you're talking about? The room froze. I felt a heat run down my spine. Before, I might have laughed it off or shifted the topic, but that day, I didn't. I looked him in the eye and said, calm and firm, you've got the wrong person. I'm not the one you should test. No anger, no rant, no lowering myself, just a clear line drawn. And in that moment, the energy in the room shifted. No one laughed. No one backed him up. Everyone knew. Someone had finally said what needed to be said. I don't tell this story to sound tough or witty. I share it because it taught me something crucial. You don't need to shout to protect yourself. You don't need to stoop to someone else's level to fight back. You just need to be clear enough to make them realize this is the line. And if they cross it, there will be no compromise. Stoic philosophy teaches that calm is not surrender. It is a higher form of power. When you don't react emotionally, you refuse to play their game. And when you set boundaries without rage, you force the other person to face themselves. No more laughs, no more games. Only silence, which, to the rude, is the most terrifying thing because it denies them the one thing they crave: attention. When you say, I'm not the one you should test, you're not attacking anyone. You're telling yourself that you've grown enough to no longer let others mess with your limits. You no longer need to be liked at the cost of your dignity. And if someone thinks protecting your boundaries makes you too sensitive or too rigid, let them think that. They've never endured what you have. They don't know the price of prolonged silence. But you do. And now, you choose differently. So next time someone tests you with a jab, a veiled dig, or blatant disrespect, you don't need to blow up or force a smile. Just look them in the eye, stay grounded, and say, "You've got the wrong person. I'm not the one you should test." Then go back to your work, your life, your calm. Because those who truly understand the value of respect never have to shout to reclaim it. 2. Funny, is that really how you ask for attention? Not everyone who insults you hates you. Sometimes they're just desperate to be seen. Some people walk into a room and immediately seek out someone smaller to attack. Not because you're wrong, but because they need someone to step on to feel tall. They don't want connection, they want spotlight. And the fastest way to get it is to put someone else down. You'll recognize them quickly. They never address issues directly. Instead, they throw sarcastic jokes, half-hearted compliments, and funny remarks wrapped in a thin layer of humor. They smile while making someone go quiet, then act like it was just a joke. But what they're really fishing for isn't laughter. It's a reaction. They want to see if you're hurt. They want to watch you squirm, snap, or break. To them, everything is a stage. And you're just a prop in their performance. I once met someone like that at an old friend's reunion. The atmosphere was light, everyone relaxed, no one showing off. Then he walked in and started taking shots at people one by one. Someone dressed casually, wedding or nap time. Someone mentioned work. Wow, sounds ambitious. Sure you can handle it? And when he got to me, he sneered and said loudly, "Still doing that little project? Must be nice having so much free time." The table went silent. In the past, I might have chuckled awkwardly to keep the peace. But that day, I just looked at him, nodded slightly, and said, "Funny, is that really how you ask for attention? Want a hug?" No anger, no insult, just a question. Soft enough not to hurt, sharp enough to end the act. As I expected, he didn't say another word. No one else chimed in, but their eyes said it all. They had seen it too, just no one had dared name it. The problem with people like that isn't cruelty, it's loneliness. They don't know real connection, so they've learned to draw attention through negativity. They don't feel their own worth, so they try to lower others to rise above. But the saddest part isn't the emptiness, it's that they don't even see it. They call it personality. They mistake sharpness for wit, but those with true depth never hurt others, just to feel significant. When you reply with, "Funny, is that really how you ask for attention?" You're not attacking, you're holding up a mirror. Gently but clearly you're saying, "I see you. I know what you're doing, but I won't play." And what confuses them most is that you don't react. You don't get mad, flustered, or retreat. You just expose their behavior without fanfare. And in that moment, the control shifts back to you. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be cold or indifferent. On the contrary, it teaches us to see the truth behind actions, to understand that not every word deserves our emotion. Many people act out not because they're bad, but because they've never learned better. And if you can see them with calm, without judgment, you've already stepped beyond their game. Attention is craved more than truth. Some will stir trouble, insult, or even harm themselves, just to be noticed. But what they don't realize is not all spotlights make people shine. Some lights only expose the emptiness inside. And when you refuse to give them a reaction, you also refuse to be fuel for their ego. So next time someone storms into your life like a tornado, mocking, twisting pain into jokes, trying to throw you off, don't respond on instinct. Take a deep breath, meet them with calm eyes and say, "Funny, is that really how you ask for attention?" Then go back to your life. No dramatic exit, no need to explain. Just keep living as if they never had the power to pull you off center. Because you have a choice, and that choice is a power they'll never understand. 3. You're not on the level to deserve my reaction. Some conversations are never meant to uncover truth, only to provoke conflict. The other person isn't there to understand you. They don't listen to learn, but to counter. They don't ask to gain insight, but to undermine. They enter a conversation like it's a stage, and they need you to play the role of the reactor, angry, defensive, off balance, for their act to feel complete. But you don't have to perform for them. Because the truth is, not everyone deserves your reaction, and sometimes saying you're not on the level to deserve my reaction is the simplest yet most profound way to reclaim ownership of your mind. I once worked in an environment where the smartest people were rarely the loudest. More often, the loudest voices contributed the least. They liked to interrupt, to show off, and especially to attack others in front of a crowd. One time, while I was presenting a new idea, one I had spent days researching and building, a colleague leaned back, smirked, and said, "Not bad, especially coming from someone who's always late." That tone wasn't feedback. It was a veiled jab aimed straight at personal credibility, meant not to improve anything but to create a wound. In the past, I might have flushed red, snapped back, tried to regain face with a cutting remark. But this time, I just looked at him, smiled, and calmly replied, "You're not on the level to deserve my reaction." Then I went back to my presentation as if his words had never existed. And strangely, the room went quiet. Not from fear, but because everyone realized the stage had been dismantled. The actor had lost his script, and I hadn't wasted a single ounce of energy defending myself. That sentence wasn't arrogance. It was a reminder of something Stoic philosophy has always emphasized. True power doesn't lie in how you respond, but in whether you choose to respond at all. Because every time you let someone control your emotions, you hand them the key to your mind. And not everyone deserves that. Those who seek control through provocation aren't strong. They're just trying to feel valuable by throwing others off balance. They know how to plant insecurity, not because they're wise, but because they're used to silencing people with tired old tricks. But when you refuse to play by their rules, when you respond with a different energy, you throw them off course. They don't know what to do when you remain calm, steady, and in full command of your space. Don't mistake silence for avoidance. Not reacting doesn't mean you didn't notice the disrespect. It simply means you've chosen another form of response. Detachment. You don't answer with emotion, but with clarity. You don't lower yourself to meet a low-level act. You rise above it by stepping away from the game entirely. There's a kind of strength that doesn't show in words, only in steadiness. When you say, "You're not on the level to deserve my reaction," you're not putting the other person down. You're drawing a line. You're protecting the mental space that belongs only to you, from those who lack the awareness to use their words responsibly. And that isn't just self-respect, it's real freedom. Stoicism teaches us that we can't control the external world, but we can always control how we respond. And that response defines who we are. A person who's triggered by every insult isn't strong. But someone who stays quiet, not out of fear, but because they no longer need to be validated by retaliation. That's someone who's crossed into another level of maturity. So next time someone provokes you, mocks you, or tries to spark a reaction just to feel a cheap win, look at them like someone acting out the wrong part in a play you've already left. Take a breath, stay calm, and say, "You're not on the level to deserve my reaction." Then carry on. Don't look back. Don't justify yourself, because the truth is, the only one who gets to define you is you. And you no longer live to prove anything to those who haven't grown quiet enough to truly listen. 4. All that effort just to sound insecure? Some remarks seem clever, witty, or polished. But if you sit with them long enough, you'll see they're just insecurity dressed in language. Rude people don't always come at you directly. They don't shout, don't insult openly. They choose something more subtle, burying contempt inside compliments, hiding envy under the guise of honest feedback. And if you're not careful, you'll think they're genuinely offering something helpful. But if you take a step back, observe, and ask the right question, their mask slips. That question is, all that effort just to sound insecure? I once received a comment from a coworker after a presentation I had poured weeks of work into. It wasn't an outright insult, nor a clear critique. He simply said with a soft smile, as if complimenting me, "Not bad. I guess confidence really can make anything sound impressive, huh?" The room chuckled faintly. I smiled too, but inside I felt hollow. Not because I believed him, but because I realized the comment didn't come from reason. It came from something deeper, a crack in his own self-worth. It was a carefully veiled remark, not meant to illuminate anything, but to cover his own insecurity by making someone else feel smaller. In the past, I might have snapped back, or worse, felt the need to prove myself again, but this time I simply looked at him and said, "All that effort, just to sound insecure?" No mockery, no put down, just a truth laid bare, so clear it silenced the entire room. Because everyone knew, this wasn't a joke anymore. It was a wake-up call. The truth is, people who constantly lash out aren't always driven by hate. More often, they're at war with themselves. They see your confidence and feel small. They see your steadiness and feel unmoored. But instead of facing that, they try to deny your value, hoping it'll make them feel better about their own. What they call sharpness is just a coat of paint covering a cracked foundation. When you say, "All that effort just to sound insecure," you're not attacking. You're reflecting. You're offering the other person a chance to see themselves clearly. And that's what unsettles them. They didn't expect their act to be seen through so quickly. They're not used to someone pulling back the curtain. Most people just smile politely, go home, and carry the bruise in silence. But not you. You don't strike back. You ask a question. A question so precise they can't escape it. Stoicism doesn't teach you to look down on others. It teaches you to see through pretense, to understand that negative behavior doesn't always stem from malice, but sometimes from silent cries for help. And because of that, you don't have to excuse it. You can be compassionate without being weak. You can recognize their insecurity without letting it bend your boundaries. And sometimes the most human response isn't to endure quietly, but to hold up a mirror, not to wound them, but to make them stop. That sentence works because it doesn't carry anger. It's not meant to belittle, but to place truth on the table without fear. It's how you show your strength, not by shouting, but by being clear. It sets you apart, not because you fight back with venom, but because you don't need venom to stand tall. You only need clarity. And that's what the insecure fear the most. clarity. Because it doesn't let them hide behind sarcasm. It strips away their role as the clever one. It forces them to see themselves. And for many, that's more painful than any insult could ever be. 5. I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion. There's a truth we're rarely taught. Not every opinion holds equal weight, and not everyone who speaks deserves your attention. Yet in practice, many of us fall into the same trap. We hear a criticism, a sarcastic remark, a dismissive comment, and immediately feel the need to react. We ask ourselves, do they really think that? Did I do something wrong? Should I explain myself? And somehow, those worthless words linger in our minds longer than kindness ever does. Not because their words are sharp, but because we haven't yet learned how to properly evaluate the opinions of others. I remember the first time I truly understood this. I had just shared a personal idea on social media, a creative project I had poured months into, not because anyone asked me to, but because I believed in it. It wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. It was the product of passion and patience. Then, an old acquaintance, someone who, to my knowledge, had never built anything of their own, left a comment. This idea feels kind of amateur. You might want to rethink posting it. In the past, I might have worried. I might have asked myself if they were right. I might have deleted the post and gone quiet. But this time, I replied with one sentence. I'm not offended. I just don't value your opinion. That response wasn't arrogance. It wasn't a slap. It was a boundary. A simple, firm line. Because not everyone with a mouth deserves space in your mind. Many people speak not to help you grow, but to feel powerful. They judge not because they understand you, but because they've never understood themselves. And when you give them the power to shake your confidence, you elevate them to a place they were never qualified to stand. Stoic philosophy teaches us that not every word deserves a reaction, because not every word comes from reason. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Other people's opinions do not define your worth. They reflect their own mental state." Which means, when someone says something negative, what they're exposing is not the truth about you, but a distorted glimpse of their own inner world, shaped by past pain, bias, and lack of clarity. And unless you remind yourself of that, you'll let their flawed lens define your reality. You don't need anger to draw a line, and you don't need silence just to keep the peace. There's a middle path, a calm clarity free of resentment. When you say, "I'm not offended, I just don't value your opinion," you're taking ownership of what enters your mind. You're saying, "I hear you, I understand what you're trying to say, but it doesn't matter to me." And if you can say that without bitterness, you're practicing one of the highest forms of self-mastery. What's amusing is how many people think that speaking automatically gives their words weight. But the truth is, not everyone has the standing for their voice to carry. Some have never made the effort to do anything meaningful, yet feel entitled to critique the path others walk. Some have never stepped onto the field, yet shout from the sidelines with condescension. And if you let them steer your emotions, you're giving them a role they were never qualified to play, judge of your journey. Some might say you're cold, uncoachable, or dismissive. But you don't need to convince them. Those who truly want to help you improve will offer feedback with care, understanding, and a spirit of growth. As for those who just want to throw stones and walk away, they don't need a response. They need to be placed where they belong, outside your focus. 6. The more you speak, the more I value silence. Not everyone who talks deserves to be heard. Some speak to share insight, to connect, to inspire. But others speak just to fill space, to prove themselves, to mask ignorance with a performance of confidence. They speak as if silence is a threat. They interrupt, comment on everything like self-declared experts, and always try to have the last word. Not because their words carry value, but because they don't know when to stop. I once worked with someone like that. In nearly every meeting, every topic, he was the first and most frequent to speak. Whether it was finance, strategy, tech, even subjects far beyond his domain, he always had an opinion. But if you listened closely, you would realize what he said lacked depth. His statements were hollow, borrowed, often pieced together from things he read online and recycled as if they were personal insights. He didn't speak to understand. He spoke to avoid being forgotten. One time, while a teammate was presenting a deeply thought-out proposal, this man interrupted with a smirk and said, "Interesting idea. If we were still living in 2010. The room went silent. I turned to him, looked him in the eye, and said gently, "You know, the more you speak, the more I value silence." No anger, no sarcasm, just a quiet truth, sharp enough to cut through the noise without a single raised voice. Some people fear silence because in it there is no applause, no spotlight, no validation. But silence is where truth lives. It doesn't perform. It doesn't seek approval. Yet it holds more weight than any hollow speech. When you encounter someone who speaks endlessly just to occupy space, you begin to appreciate the stillness. That's when you realize, not every voice has something to say, and not every sound carries substance. The more you speak, the more I value silence isn't an insult. It's a mirror. It makes the other person pause, not out of shame, but out of confusion, because they're not used to being disarmed with calm. They expect deference or a fight. But when you deliver a single sentence in the right moment and let silence do the rest, you'll see that composure can end an outburst without a single blow. Stoic philosophy has always taught that speech should be weighed as carefully as action. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen twice as much as we speak." In a world where everyone is scrambling to speak louder, choosing to stay silent or to speak only what matters is a sign of strength. You don't need to argue with people who talk much but say little. Let their noise reveal their nature. Someone with real wisdom doesn't speak to prove themselves, but to offer value. They don't need to dominate conversations because they know when to speak and when to listen. On the other hand, those lacking confidence wear words like a mask. They hope that if they speak loud enough, long enough, no one will notice they don't actually know what they're saying. So when you say, "The more you speak, the more I value silence," you're not just shielding yourself from the noise. You're reminding both them and yourself that silence isn't emptiness. It's a space for reflection, a place where what truly matters is shaped, a sign of someone who knows the weight of their words. So next time you're faced with someone who talks endlessly, to cover, to dominate, or to distract from their own insecurity, you don't have to argue. You don't have to endure. Take a breath, stay calm, and say, "The more you speak, the more I value silence." Then let the stillness speak for you. Because sometimes the strongest thing isn't what you say, it's what you choose not to say. 7. If you're trying to hurt me, you might need to try harder. Some people speak not to share a view or start a conversation, but to attack. Not with fists, but with words. They wait until you're exposed, or when you're showing something genuine, then launch a sharp remark, often disguised as a joke, sarcasm, or just honest feedback. Their aim is nothing more than to wound you, to make you feel small, to cause you to shrink back and doubt yourself. But if you've been through enough real wounds in life, you'll realize those strikes no longer carry the same weight. And then, with a quiet smile, you'll answer, "If you're trying to hurt me, you might need to try harder." I remember exactly the first time I used that line. A former teammate, someone who often asserted superiority through words, threw out a cutting remark after one of my presentations. Well, that was bold. Kind of a textbook example of trying too hard, wasn't it? He said it in front of everyone, with a half smile, and the heavy silence that followed felt like the room was waiting to see how I'd respond. In the past, I might have felt hurt, worried I had done something wrong, maybe even apologized, though I had done nothing wrong. But that day, I simply looked at him, gave a slight nod, and said, "If you're trying to hurt me, you might need to try harder." I didn't lower my voice, nor did I raise it. I spoke as if stating a plain truth, then went back to my work, as if his words had never existed. That sentence wasn't retaliation, nor an attempt to put him in his place. It was a boundary, a quiet declaration that said, "I've been through worse." I'm not easily shaken by unkind words, and I refuse to let someone who hasn't walked my road shape how I feel. Because the person who can hurt you the most isn't the one with the cruel remark. It's you. If you believe what they say, carry it home, repeat it in your mind, and let it slowly erode your trust in yourself. Stoic philosophy reminds us no one can hurt you unless you allow it. Epictetus once said, "We are disturbed not by events, but by our thoughts about them." This means the insult itself isn't the real problem. The problem is whether or not you accept it as truth. If you know your worth, if you've trained your calm, if you understand that someone trying to harm you is really wrestling with their own darkness, then you don't need to react. You simply remind them with composure, "You haven't reached the part of me that used to be fragile, because I've grown stronger than I once was." Some wounds in life are invisible. The betrayal when you trusted most. The moment you were dismissed despite giving your all. The nights you sat alone among the wreckage of what once was your dream. These painful experiences, in time, become quiet armor forged from within. And once you've truly fallen, you won't be taken down again by cheap words. And those who try to hurt you, if they don't understand that, are simply wasting effort on a battle too shallow for them to play. Still, you don't need to become cold or numb. Stoicism doesn't teach emotional suppression. It teaches awareness, the ability to discern between what's constructive and what's disguised hostility. And when you recognize the latter, you don't need to respond with anger or pain. Just one calm sentence. "If you're trying to hurt me, you might need to try harder." It's soft enough to avoid hostility, but sharp enough to draw a clear boundary. So if someone mocks you, belittles you, or tries to press on what they think are unhealed wounds, remember, you don't need to get angry. You don't need to prove them wrong. You only need to show them that you're no longer pulled down so easily. And if they haven't noticed that yet, then let that one line serve as a gentle reminder. "If you're trying to hurt me, you might need to try harder." Then keep walking with unshakable calm. Because you've learned, peace doesn't come from people not attacking you. It comes from no longer letting them reach you the way they used to. I used to believe that to earn respect, I had to always be kind, always gentle, always yielding. But I was wrong. Some people don't see kindness as a virtue. They see it as a weakness to exploit. And if you don't set boundaries, they will keep pushing forward, not because you're wrong, but because they're used to never being stopped. Through Stoic philosophy, I've learned that staying silent doesn't mean staying silent forever. There are moments when you need to speak up, not with anger, but with clarity. A calm sentence, said at the right time, can end things that 100 explanations never could. Since learning that, I've stopped seeking approval from everyone. I've stopped trying to please those who don't respect me. I've learned to choose my reactions carefully, to guard my dignity with composure, and to use words not for retaliation, but for self-definition. If you find value in calmness, clarity, and emotional self-control, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future content. The journey to becoming a steady presence in a chaotic world isn't easy, but each day, each choice, each timely word brings you closer to a strength no one can take from you. I'll see you in the next video.